Arthur, a tyrannical king, once ruled the world with an iron fist. During his rise to power, Arthur slaughtered enemies, nuked cities, and committed countless atrocities, all for the sake of power. However, one day, reflecting on his actions, he was overcome with guilt and died of a heart attack. As he descended into the abyss, a voice offered him a second chance, warning him not to waste it. Moments later, Arthur opened his eyes to find two people looking at him. The man introduced himself as Reynold, Arthur's father, while Alice, his mother, also looked on. They didn't expect their newborn to understand, but they were overjoyed. Arthur slowly realized these were indeed his parents, and he had just been born. He struggled to believe he was a baby again, yet his parents cared for him tenderly. Despite his happiness, he disliked being stuck in a baby's body. His head felt oversized, he couldn't speak, and he involuntarily soiled his diaper every few hours, losing all control. Then, he witnessed something stranger, Reynold channeling energy into his fists, shattering a boulder. Arthur was astonished. Despite his years as a ruler, he knew nothing of this power. Reynold, proud of his feat, turned to his family for praise, but a falling rock struck his head. Alice, having anticipated such an accident, used magic to heal Reynolds, cautioning him to be more careful. While Reynold might show off, his serious punches could easily kill a wild boar during hunts, making him invaluable to his party. Returning from a hunt, Reynold prepared for a welcome hug, but remembering he was covered in boar blood, he went to clean up first. Arthur learned two things. This world was dangerous, necessitating weapons for protection, and he needed to learn to fight to live freely. Back home, Alice suggested a nap for Arthur, which he surprisingly welcomed. In his past life, peaceful sleep was rare due to constant assassination attempts. Months passed, and Arthur's limbs grew strong enough for him to move. His first act was to look in a mirror, finally accepting his baby form. His parents found his fascination with his reflection cute. Later, when Alice put him down for a nap, Arthur put his plan into motion. Once alone, he threw his blanket from the crib, climbed down, and crawled to the library while Alice did dishes unnoticed. In the library, he grabbed a book to learn about this world. He discovered the continent was called Dicathan, divided into the Dark Kingdom, dwarves, the Elenoir Kingdom, elves, and the Sappan Kingdom, humans. Although no one had nuked cities there, Arthur sought more knowledge. Another book explained the lack of advanced technology. Magic existed. People manipulated mana within their bodies for two purposes: augmentation, enhancing strength, defense, agility, and conjuring, projecting mana to control phenomena. Arthur found no mention of Alice's healing magic, assuming she was an exception. Most people manifested mana at puberty, learning to control it through a mana core, similar to the key that granted Arthur power in his past life. Focusing his energy, Arthur felt his mana core begin to develop. Before he could continue, Alice found him, worried sick. Relieved he was unharmed, she held him, noticing something different. Arthur feared she sensed his mana, but she had simply noticed he had soiled himself again. 2 years passed. Alice wrote in her journal, grateful for Arthur's healthy growth but concerned by his lack of smiles. Outside, Reynold was giving Arthur sword lessons. Arthur seemed interested, but Alice was furious at Reynold for letting a 2-year-old play with a dangerous stick. Arthur knew not to anger Alice. To avoid further dangerous activities, Alice took Arthur to town. He was excited for first-hand information about this world, observing weapons and unfamiliar substances. He even witnessed fire magic up close, making the trip invaluable. Exhausted, Arthur struggled to stay awake, and Alice wanted him to nap. Despite the limitations of his new life, Arthur enjoyed life with loving parents, a stark contrast to his orphanage childhood. He soon fell asleep on Alice's shoulder. Carrying him to his crib, she told him how proud she was of his curiosity and adventurous spirit, assuming he inherited it from Reynold. She knew he would eventually want to explore the world, and while she preferred a peaceful life for him, she would support his happiness. The next day, Arthur watched Reynold practice magic in the yard, interested in seeing it up close. Rocks floated, a seemingly impressive feat by Reynold's standards, but rather pitiful to Arthur. Reynold's strength lay in augmentation, not conjuring. Inspired, Arthur tried to train, but Alice called him for a nap. Unable to speak, Arthur whined near the bookshelf, but Alice insisted on rest. Arthur then employed a new technique, pouting. His baby cuteness proved effective. Alice relented and let him read. Alone, Arthur practiced with his mana core, having made significant progress over 2 years. Gathering mana fragments, he had formed a core. With more effort, he might cast his first spell. However, underestimating his mana strength, he accidentally blew up the house. Alice and Reynold outside were mostly unharmed, though Reynold's back was badly burned. They rushed inside, fearing for Arthur's life. In the ruined library, they found Arthur unharmed, the source of the explosion. At barely 3, he was already a powerful mage, a feat impossible for his age. He stood proudly, but the collapsing house posed a new threat. 2 roof beams fell towards him. His toddler legs were too slow. Alice and Reynold rushed in to save him. Alice shielded him, while Reynold used magic to block the debris. Arthur was shocked. No one had ever risked their life for him. Alice, relieved, cried, and seeing her tears, Arthur cried too. Such care was foreign to his past life as a ruthless king. He recalled an assassination attempt where the culprit's family faced horrific punishment. Arthur's mercy was a swift execution. Now, his Mondays involved training with Reynold. Reynold wanted Arthur to use gauntlets, but Arthur, with a lifetime of sword experience, refused. So, Reynold also used a sword, reinforcing it with mana. To his shock, Arthur did the same, easily cutting through Reynold's blade. Realizing Arthur was too talented for him to train, Reynold considered a professional teacher and went to discuss it with Alice. Alice vehemently opposed sending Arthur away. They had agreed Reynold would teach fighting, and she would teach magic. However, Reynold pointed out Arthur's feat with the sword, despite being just a toddler. He argued for a proper teacher to nurture his extraordinary talent. Alice conceded Arthur's talent, but hated the thought of him alone in the city. They argued until Arthur suggested they all go to the city, solving everyone's concerns. They agreed and began preparations. The next day, a carriage arrived carrying them and their friends, the twin horns, who had helped rebuild their house. Adam, the leader, introduced himself. Angela introduced herself and her chess, nearly choking Arthur. Darren gently intervened. Arthur then noticed Jasmine on the carriage roof. She remained silent. The others explained she was Jasmine, and the final member was Helen the Archer. With introductions complete, they set off. Alice asked Arthur about his first big trip. He said yes, but internally, he mused on the primitive transportation compared to his past life's flying cars. After traveling most of the day, they camped for lunch. Wolves attacked. The wolves were foolish, charging directly and quickly being defeated by the adventurers. Arthur found the display interesting, his first real combat experience in this world. He resolved to become strong enough to handle such threats. With wolf meat available, they planned a plain grilled dinner due to lack of spices. Alice noticed Reynolds' slightly injured arm and offered to heal it. Jasmine cautioned her to wait. The others gathered around, aware of healers' rarity and vulnerability. Once Alice healed Reynolds, they resumed their activities. Adam, wanting exercise, challenged 4-year-old Arthur to a practice spar. Adam, aware of Arthur's strength, imbued his spear with mana. Arthur did the same, channeling magic into his feet. As they clashed, Arthur vanished, reappearing behind Adam. He lost his footing, allowing Adam to recover. They exchanged blows, but Arthur's toddler body was too light, and he was knocked back. The others caught him, scolding Adam for nearly hurting him. Adam insisted he couldn't hold back Arthur's surprising strength, suspecting Reynolds' secret training. In reality, Arthur's abilities were self-taught. Jasmine approached Arthur, impressed, and asked him to teach her his footwork magic. Arthur, wanting to keep it secret, was met with her persistent gaze. He knew he would likely have to teach her eventually. The next morning, the journey continued. During breaks, Adam gave Arthur basic spear lessons, and Helen taught him archery. Arthur, only experienced with swords, learned quickly. Grateful, he decided to teach Jasmine his speed-enhancing magic. By channeling magic into the feet and using wind magic simultaneously, one could greatly increase speed. Jasmine replicated it perfectly after one demonstration. Later, Arthur read a magic book in the carriage, with Jasmine inexplicably close, constantly finding excuses to be near him. The next morning, Jasmine gave Arthur a knife as thanks, a rare gesture of affection from her. They continued their journey. While Arthur read, bandits suddenly attacked, surrounding the carriage. The bandit leader ordered the capture of the women and children for slavery. The bandits charged. The twin horns and Reynolds were individually stronger but outnumbered. Reynolds was thrown into the carriage, badly injured. Alice wanted to heal him, but Reynolds forbade it, fearing the bandits would target her if they knew her power. Instead, he told Arthur to take Alice and run. She was pregnant. Arthur hesitated, but Reynolds insisted on Alice's safety. At Reynolds' signal, Arthur prepared to flee with Alice while Reynolds held off the bandits. The bandit leader sent men after them, but Reynolds intervened. He clashed with the leader, fighting fiercely to protect his family. While Reynolds occupied the leader, other bandits went after Arthur and Alice. Adam and Jasmine threw daggers, clearing a path for their escape. Arthur, who once took without regard, now fled to protect someone precious. After running for several minutes, Arthur thought they were safe, but a magic-wielding bandit on a cliff attacked with a wind spell. Arthur, too late to react, pushed Alice aside, taking the hit himself. The blast knocked him off the cliff. As he fell, he threw Jasmine's knife at the bandit. The string wrapped around the bandit's ankle, pulling him down with Arthur. The adventurers tried to save Arthur, but he was too far. As he fell, Arthur felt a strange peace, knowing he had protected his family. He understood the desperation of the man he had executed in his past life. He hadn't hesitated to sacrifice himself for Alice. Though he didn't regret it, he wished for more time with them. Somehow, Arthur survived the fall, ending up in a cave. He encountered a terrifying monster and regretted seeking shelter there. He tried to sneak attack it, but the monster easily swatted him away, telling him to calm down and that it just wanted to be friends. Wary, Arthur was badly injured and needed food. The monster offered fruit from the cave wall. Arthur hesitated, but his injuries worsened. He tried to get up, heard a snap, and cried out. The monster told him it was a miracle he survived the fall. It offered to answer questions if Arthur ate the fruit. He was hesitant, but found the berries delicious. Once full, Arthur asked about his parents. The monster, unable to leave the cave, used its long-distance vision to show Arthur that his parents had defeated the bandits. Relieved, Arthur thanked the monster. Since he was stuck there, he decided to befriend it. The monster's name was Sylvia, and she was kind. Over the next few days, Arthur rested and healed while Sylvia watched over him. Once recovered, Arthur wanted to go home, but Sylvia warned the journey was too dangerous alone due to magical beasts and bandits in the elven forest outskirts. Sylvia could open a dimensional rift to send Arthur home or to a safer place, but it would take time. Arthur practiced swordsmanship to pass the time. Days passed. Arthur enjoyed Sylvia's company, but knew little about her, only that she was a terrifying-looking but kind creature hiding from something. After sword practice, Arthur trained his mana. Sylvia was impressed by his early mana core development, something he hadn't been taught. She demonstrated accumulating mana while casting a spell, a technique Arthur realized would make him incredibly strong. Before teaching him, Sylvia asked what he would do with such power. Arthur recalled his family's near demise by bandits and vowed to destroy anyone who threatened them. Sylvia flicked his forehead, disapproving of his answer. She wouldn't teach her technique to someone with such a mindset. She explained that while she could easily kill him, she could also be gentle. She urged him not to let anger and hatred control him, leading to an empty life. She asked again what he would do with the power. This time, Arthur focused on the smiles of his loved ones and replied he would use it to protect them. Sylvia was pleased. Meanwhile, outside the cave, a monster resembling Sylvia was tracking her, closing in. In Arthur's past life as king, he was a tool of the senators, forced into violence he disliked. Back in the present, Sylvia taught Arthur her mana accumulation technique. He practiced, feeling his strength increase. He thanked Sylvia, but she sensed someone approaching, pushed him into rocks, and told him to be quiet. Arthur saw another monster identical to Sylvia. Sylvia seemed to know him and was surprised he found her. The second monster demanded Sylvia come with him, but she refused and he attacked. Arthur wanted to help, but Sylvia telepathically told him not to worry. The monster tried to persuade Sylvia, threatening to kill her. Sylvia refused and revealed her true form, a dragon. In this form, she unleashed immense power, firing a blast at the monster. He blocked it, warning she would die using such power in her weakened state. Sylvia, aware of the risk, didn't care. She had lived a long, happy life. She pushed the monster into a wall, but he retaliated with blasts. Sylvia took damage but was more concerned about Arthur's safety. The monster launched another blast. Unable to dodge without hitting Arthur, Sylvia used her full power to intercept it, temporarily stopping time. While time was stopped, she told Arthur to come out. He did, wanting answers, especially about her being a dragon. But time was short. Her time stop wouldn't last. She quickly opened the dimensional rift she had been preparing, but due to her injuries and haste, it led to the middle of nowhere instead of Arthur's home. She had hoped to avoid the dangerous forest, but now had no choice. Confident in Arthur's survival skills and the technique she taught him, she wasn't worried. She asked again what he would use his power for. Without hesitation, Arthur replied he would only use it to protect his family. Satisfied he wouldn't use it selfishly, Sylvia prepared to give him a few parting gifts. So, Sylvia conjures an egg and a feather before Arthur. She instructs him to wrap the egg with the feather and to cherish it. As a final gift, she imprints her will onto Arthur's arms, leaving a mark that resembles full sleeve tattoos, much to Arthur's confusion. Sylvia, lacking the strength for a detailed explanation, tells him he will eventually understand its use, regretting she won't be there to guide him. She then apologizes, admitting she could have sent him home sooner but selfishly enjoyed his company, a decision that ultimately endangered him. Arthur feels helpless, unable to save Sylvia despite her teachings. He doesn't care that she's a dragon or a monster, she's family. He calls her mother, but Sylvia reminds him he already has one. Arthur then suggests grandma, which Sylvia loves, asking him to repeat it, which he happily does. Though saddened by their impending separation, time is running out. Sylvia nudges him towards the portal. Arthur, understanding, takes her gifts and steps through. At the last moment, he hesitates, urging Sylvia to join him, but she can't. She closes the portal, sending Arthur away. Time resumes, and the other monster's blast hits Sylvia, seemingly fatally. She collapses. The monster, wary, approaches her still form. As he gets close, Sylvia unleashes her remaining energy, incinerating him and everything within a meter. During his teleportation, Arthur hears Sylvia's final message, asking if he remembers her words about the right way to use his power. Arthur remembers, though deeply saddened. Sylvia explains that the world is often sad, but Arthur has the power to change it for the better, one step at a time, drawing on his past life as a king. Though she didn't condone his past rule, she believes that without hatred consuming him, he will become a great king who improves the world. Moments later, Arthur awakens on the forest floor, vowing to fulfill Sylvia's wish. But first, he needs to find his way out of the forest. After being teleported into the elven forest, Arthur begins his journey to return home. But while he is walking, he suddenly hears a blood-curdling scream from across the woods. It sounds like it's coming from a little girl, so he immediately gathers mana in his feet and begins racing to check it out. He jumps up into a tall tree for a good vantage point, and once he is up there, he can clearly see a group of bandits kidnapping a little girl. She tried getting away from them, but the bandits have already grabbed her and are covering her mouth to stop her from screaming anymore. Since the girl is an elf, they plan to sell her as a slave on the black market for a huge profit as soon as they leave the forest. So they tie her up and stuff the girl in the back of their carriage. As Arthur watches the whole thing unfold, he has flashbacks to the moment he and his family were attacked by bandits as well. He recalls hearing the bandits mention something about keeping him and the women in the group alive so they could be sold as slaves later, and it really pisses him off. The first thought that comes to mind is that he should slaughter all the bandits for committing such a heinous crime. But he remembers what Sylvia told him about controlling his rage, so he takes a moment to think and calm down. He realizes that if he attacked right now, it would put the girl's life in danger, so he decides to be patient and wait for the right chance to strike. All the bandits get in their carriage to start riding out of the forest, and Arthur follows them closely from the shadows. By nightfall, the bandits are forced to take a break and set up camp since they can't travel in the dark, and Arthur is contemplating whether he should continue following them until they get to a human town or attack them now. But then he overhears the bandit talking about how his favorite race is elves, so Arthur realizes he can't risk leaving them alone with the girl any longer. However, he still needs to wait for it to get dark before he makes his move. So Arthur sits down and starts meditating to prepare himself for all the murderer charges he's about to catch. Once it is sufficiently dark, Arthur opens his eyes and begins planning his attack. He notices that the bandits have a group of horned wolves on a leash, and he finds it odd that the wolves are obeying a group of humans with no resistance. He takes a closer look at them and realizes that they are wearing magic collars to force them to be obedient, and he can use this to his advantage, so he throws a couple of rocks at the wolves to rile them up. The bandits hear their wolves howling over there, and the leader orders one of his men to hurry up and go shut those damn wolves up. The bandit immediately gets up and kicks one of the wolves in the neck to get it to stop barking, and the second the bandit is distracted, Arthur seizes the opportunity. He summons a mana blade before jumping down behind the bandit, and within a few seconds, the bandit has been slashed to death. Arthur then takes the bandit's weapon, and as another one comes to check what all the commotion is, Arthur jumps on his back and slits his throat. That's 2 bandits down already, but Arthur's body is already getting exhausted, so he needs to end this quickly. Just then, another bandit comes to check why the other 2 are taking so long. So Arthur tries to insta-kill this one as well, but unfortunately, he missed the vital organs, so the guy screams and alerts the other bandits of Arthur's presence. The bandit leader realizes that Arthur is a mage, so he knows this isn't going to be an easy fight, but he also doesn't want to kill Arthur because selling a mage kit on the black market would earn him even more money than the elf girl. The bandit leader begins channeling magic into his arms and swings at Arthur, so Arthur jumps back and tries to counter with a kick, but the bandit leader managed to dodge. Arthur tries to catch him off guard by throwing his knife at him, but the bandit catches it and uses it against him. As a result, Arthur is knocked to the ground, and the bandit lifts him up by the ankles to taunt him. He tells Arthur he is no match for an adult when it comes to strength, and Arthur realizes that the bandit is right, so he decides to attack with his magic instead. He casts a fireball right on top of the bandit's knee, and while he is screaming out in pain, Arthur stabs him in the head with his knife. Now, all that's left is to finish off the bandit that Arthur injured earlier, and once he's dead, Arthur goes to check on the girl in the carriage. The girl was blindfolded the entire time, so she has no idea what's going on. So Arthur tells her he has taken care of all of the bandits, so she is safe now. Her name is Tessia, and as Arthur leads her out of the carriage, he tells her she can go home. But Tessia suddenly notices some blood on Arthur's hand, and she gets really worried about him. Arthur realizes that it's normal for children to be horrified at the sight of blood, so it might not be a good idea to let her see all the dead bodies on the floor. He asks Tessia to wait over here for a minute and goes to cover up all the bandit bodies with a tarp. She asks Arthur what happened to the people that kidnapped her, and Arthur doesn't want to admit that he killed them, so he just says they got into a bit of an accident, so they won't be bothering her anymore. The girl doesn't seem to have any more questions, so Arthur gets her stuff out of the bandit carriage for her and says goodbye, because he needs to continue heading home. However, Tessia grabs his arm and begs him to stay because she doesn't want to be left alone. If Arthur leaves her here by herself, she might get eaten by tree ghosts or something. He asks her if she knows how to get home, and she does know the directions, but she has no idea how long it will take to get to her village. Arthur doesn't like the idea of taking maybe tour, but he also knows there's no chance that Tessia will make it home alive if he doesn't help, so he ends up agreeing to escort her back home. Arthur looks over at the wolves that the bandits captured, and he briefly considers using them for transportation, but he has no idea how to maintain control over a wolf, so he wants to just leave them behind. However, Tessia says they should at least remove the magic collars on the wolves so they can return to the forest. Arthur warns her that the wolves might attack once she removes the collars, but she thinks she'll be fine since she hasn't done anything to anger them. And as a resident of this forest, it is her job to take care of the creatures that live here. She eventually takes the collars off the wolves, and sure enough, the wolves peacefully walk back into the forest. The next morning, Arthur and Tessia begin walking in the direction of the elf village, and after a while, they take a break to eat. Arthur cooks up a little stew and tells her she has to eat it because she'll need the energy for the long journey ahead. Tessia thinks the stew smells weird, but Arthur isn't exactly a world-class chef. It's literally made out of nothing but dried meat and salt, so it doesn't taste good, but it's better than nothing. Tessia asks Arthur why he came to the Elshire forest in the first place since it's rare for humans to come here, much less a lone child. So Arthur explains how he got separated from his family and ended up here. While they are on the topic, Arthur asks Tessia what it's like to live in the kingdom of Elenoir, and she absolutely loves it here. All of her parents are often busy with work, so she spends most of her time with her servant and her grandfather. They continue their journey, but since Tessia doesn't know how far away her village is, it's hard to gauge how long this journey will take. And to make matters worse, those wolves that Tessia released have been following them for a while now, so Arthur is really wishing he had just killed them from the start. That night, Arthur decides to stand guard outside the tent to make sure the wolves don't attack him and Tessia while they are sleeping, but after a while, Tessia pokes her head out and asks Arthur to come to bed. Arthur tells her that he's not sleepy, so he's going to stand guard out here, but she's way too scared to be alone, so she pleads with him to come inside the tent with her. Arthur eventually gives in, so he decides to just keep watch from inside the tent for Tessia's sake. She's trying to pretend that she's not scared, but she also demands that Arthur stay by her side at all times. Before she goes to bed, she wants to learn a little about the human kingdom, so she asks Arthur if it's true that all humans are perverts who marry multiple wives. Arthur is surprised to hear Tessia say that and asks where she heard it from, so she explains that her grandfather told her. Arthur can't deny that people like that exist, especially in the Gerard family, but for the most part, humans are modest people. Tessia believes Arthur, so she turns over and falls asleep immediately. The wolves didn't attack, so by morning, Arthur and Tessia got up and continued their journey. Tessia has really been warming up to Arthur over the past few days, and now that she has had a chance to forget about the slave traders, she seems a lot happier. Although she is still pretty hopeless when it comes to survival skills because she can't even cross a creek on her own, so Arthur has to carry her across. All of a sudden, Arthur is hit with a strange throbbing pain in his chest, and he has no idea what's wrong with him. Tessia worriedly runs off to go find some medicinal herbs that might help, but Arthur doesn't think this is a regular illness. While he's propped up against a tree, the wolf from before shows up, and Arthur is starting to panic because he is in no condition to fight it off if it decides to attack right now. Tessia soon returns with the herbs. So Arthur warns her to stay away, because the wolf might be dangerous, but to his surprise, the wolf just drops a dead pig in front of Arthur, and walks away. Arthur is confused by what just happened, but Tessia assumes the wolf was trying to thank him for his help earlier. That night, Arthur and Tessia set up camp, and enjoy some roasted meat by the fireside. This tastes a lot better than the stew, so Tessia really enjoys it, and while she was searching for medicinal herbs earlier, she happened to find some mushrooms, so she offers some to Arthur. But he probably shouldn't have accepted the strange mushrooms, because it gave him a bad case of diarrhea. After Arthur is done emptying his guts, he is really tired, so he is seconds away from passing out, but Tessia keeps talking to him. She is telling Arthur about how her grandpa used to read her storybooks about the human and dwarven kingdoms, so she always wanted to visit those places, but she was never allowed to since elves don't trust people from the other races. Just then, Tessia realizes that Arthur hasn't been listening to a single word she said, but she knows he's just sleepy, so she covers him with a blanket and wishes him a good night. The next morning, the two continue their journey, but the pain in Arthur's chest is getting worse. Tessia apologizes for not being able to help, but Arthur tells her it's not a big deal. Changing topics, Tessia asks Arthur if it's alright for her to call him Artie since she thinks of him as a friend after all. They spent so much time together, and the two of them have gotten really close. Arthur says he doesn't mind being friends with her, and Tessia is surprised that he didn't react much. Arthur then jokingly swears to cherish every moment the great Lady Tessia thinks of him as a friend, but that makes her upset, so she tells Arthur to stop acting so childish. Arthur thinks it's funny that she would say that when she was the one begging him to stay by her side at all times because she was scared, but Tessia says that's an entirely different thing. Jokes aside, now that Arthur thinks about it, Tessia is the first friend he has ever made. Even in his old world, people were so scared of him that he never truly had anyone whom he could call a friend till now. Just then, Tessia spots something that looks familiar, so she tells Arthur to come take a look. Arthur comes over expecting to see a cool-looking stick, or something, but to his surprise, he is standing in front of a huge tree with a portal in the middle of it. Tessia tells Arthur that this is the entrance to Elf Village, so she extends her hand and tells him to come with her. Unfortunately, the elves still really hate humans, so the moment Arthur steps into the elf village, he's caught and held at sword point. He looks to Tessia for help, hoping she'll speak up for him, but to his surprise, Tessia just stares at him coldly and says nothing. Seeing this, Arthur thinks she has betrayed him and set him up to be killed. He can't believe he was foolish enough to think anyone would want to be his friend. After all, he's been betrayed many times in his past life. The elves are just about to cut off his head while Tessia watches silently. It turns out she wasn't part of the plan, though it's unclear why she didn't speak up earlier. As soon as she hears the guards mention killing Arthur, she tells them to stop. One of the guards warns her that Arthur is a dangerous human, but Tessia says he's not dangerous at all. In fact, he's the only reason she made it back home safely. Her words should have made the guard think twice, but instead, he accuses Arthur of brainwashing her and still wants to kill him. Before anything happens, a man shows up and orders them to let Arthur go. His name is Virion, Tessia's grandfather, and the former king of the elf tribe. He's much more reasonable and believes Tessia when she says Arthur saved her. He also apologizes to Arthur for how he was treated, although it did seem suspicious that the missing princess returned with a random human. Arthur feels relieved that he's no longer in danger, but is shocked to learn that Tessia is actually a princess, something she never told him, even after traveling together for days. Right then, Tessia's parents arrive after hearing that their daughter has returned. She runs to hug them, clearly happy to see them. If Tessia is a princess, that means her parents are the king and queen of Elenoir, but they aren't as calm as Virion. As soon as Tessia's father sees Arthur, he demands to know why a human is in his kingdom and tells his soldiers to kill him. But no one moves because Virion had already told them to leave Arthur alone, and they're all scared of him. Virion explains to the king that Arthur is the one who saved Tessia, so he shouldn't be treated like a criminal. Tessia also asks that Arthur be welcomed into the castle as a guest. Her father is unsure since humans are normally banned from even entering Elenoir, let alone the royal castle. But not wanting to upset Tessia, he agrees. Now that everything is cleared up, everyone prepares to go to the castle. Before they leave, Virion tells Arthur he wants to speak with him later. Arthur is a little cautious since he can tell Virion is very powerful, but he doesn't have time to think about it because Tessia drags him off to show him around. It's the first time Arthur has seen the elf kingdom, and he's amazed by how different it is from the human world. But the hatred for humans is still strong. Every elf stops and stares at him as he walks through the village with Tessia. Still, no one dares say anything rude since Arthur is now an official guest of the royal family. The only one treating him kindly is Tessia, but Arthur still wonders why she waited so long to help him when he was about to be killed. Suddenly, the pain in Arthur's chest returns. It keeps getting worse, and he still doesn't know why. When they reach the castle, Tessia is warmly greeted by her servants and tells them to treat Arthur with kindness and respect, even though he's a human. Once that's settled, she asks Arthur if he wants to play with her. But Arthur says he needs to talk to her parents first. They probably want to know what happened to Tessia and how they got back. They all go into the meeting room, and Tessia joins because she doesn't want to be left out. She even suggests getting snacks, so it almost feels like a tea party. But they still have serious things to discuss. Tessia's father finally introduces himself. His name is Alduin, the king of Elenoir. His wife is Muriel and his father is Virion. Arthur introduces himself as a humble commoner from the kingdom of Sapin, and he knows that someone like him would normally never be allowed in Elenoir, let alone inside the royal palace. Arthur appreciates their kindness. Alduin is surprised by how mature Arthur is, despite being just a child. But more importantly, he wants to know what exactly happened with Tessia and how she went missing. Arthur explains everything, how he got separated from his family during a bandit attack and ended up in the elven forest. He leaves out the part about meeting Sylvia in the cave. Then he explains how he found Tessia being kidnapped by slave traders. Alduin is furious that humans tried to sell his daughter into slavery, but Arthur reminds him that elves have done the same thing, so it's not just a human crime. Moving on, Virion asks how Arthur managed to save Tessia, and Arthur says he killed the slave traders. One of the guards yells that a child couldn't possibly do that, but Virion shuts him up and says he'll lose his job if he keeps talking. Arthur doesn't seem like he's lying, so Alduin says he believes him. Now that they understand the situation, Arthur makes a request. Since he got stuck in the forest after the bandit attack, he asks if they can help him get home. Alduin is angry that a human would ask a favor from the elven royal family. But since Arthur went out of his way to escort Tessia home, it's only fair. Plus, if he refuses, he'll have to deal with Tessia's temper, which he really doesn't want. So, he agrees to help. However, the teleportation gate that leads to Sapin is sealed and only opens once every 7 years during a meeting between the 3 tribes. That meeting happened 2 years ago, so the gate won't open again for another 5 years. Arthur doesn't want to wait that long, and Alduin also doesn't like the idea of a human staying in Elenoir for 5 years. So, he says he'll send soldiers to escort Arthur back to Sapin. Since it's already late, Arthur can rest in the castle and leave the next morning. Arthur thanks Alduin, but his chest pain is getting worse, and Virion notices something is wrong. Later, a room is prepared for Arthur, and he takes a bath. But the pain keeps getting getting worse, and Arthur starts to fear he might die. After his bath, he steps onto the balcony for fresh air. It helps a little, but he knows he needs to figure out what's causing the pain. Then he looks up and sees Tessia with her parents on the balcony above. This makes him think of his own parents. He doesn't know if Reynold and Alice survived the bandit attack, but he believes they did. They're strong. Still, he really wishes he could talk to them. Tessia sees that Arthur looks sad and goes to speak with him after finishing her talk with her parents. She apologizes for how her father treated him, but Arthur says he understands. Decades of war between elves and humans make it hard to trust, especially when it comes to someone's daughter. Talking about parents reminds Arthur of how far away he is from his own, and he worries they might blame him. He also blames himself for not being able to protect them during the bandit attack. But Tessia grabs his face and shakes his head. She says she doesn't know much about his parents, but if they're like hers, they'll be happy to see him again. Then, the corridor fills with glowing fireflies. Surrounded by light, Arthur remembers his parents' smiling faces. They've never shown him anything but love, so why does he think they'll hate him now? He realizes his trauma from his past life has made him overly suspicious, even of Tessia, who clearly cares for him. Suddenly, Arthur senses a projectile coming at Tessia. He catches it and charges his mana to strike the attacker. But to his surprise, the attacker is Virion. Arthur can't believe he tried to harm his own granddaughter, but Virion explains that he only threw a couple of fireflies to test Arthur's reflexes. He's impressed that Arthur reacted so fast. He just wanted to see if Arthur really had the strength to defeat those slave traders. Tessia tells her grandfather to stop messing around, but Virion says that's not the only reason he's here. He wants to have a sparring match with Arthur to test his strength. Virion uses magic to create a sword for Arthur and lifts Tessia out of harm's way. Arthur agrees and charges at Virion, but he's too fast. Even with Manta-boosted speed, Arthur can't keep up. When he thinks he has an opening, Virion shatters Arthur's wooden sword with his palm. A piece flies toward Tessia, so Arthur throws the rest of his sword to stop it. Then Arthur attacks with pure mana, but Virion counters easily. Virion's strength is overwhelming, but Arthur doesn't give up. After being knocked back, he charges again and manages to land a small hit on Virion's forehead. It doesn't hurt much, but Virion is impressed that Arthur got past his defenses. He wants to keep going, but Tessia pinches him and tells him to stop bothering Arthur. Arthur says it's okay. He's honored that someone as powerful as Virion wanted to spar with him. Then Virion says he wants to take Arthur as his disciple. Arthur is shocked and asks if he's serious. Virion says he is and asks if Arthur accepts. Arthur hesitates since he still hasn't contacted his parents. But Virion says he knows a way for Arthur to talk to them right now. Before Arthur can respond, another sharp chest pain hits him, and Virion tells him he knows the cause. He says Arthur has inherited a beast will, and unless he agrees to become Virion's disciple, the beast will is going to kill him. After hearing such horrible news, Arthur tries to sleep, but he's struggling. The anxiety of being away from his family, combined with the fear that he might die soon, gives him a terrible nightmare where he's haunted by a sleep paralysis demon. He suddenly hears someone calling his name and opens his eyes to find Tessia sitting on top of him. She's been trying to wake him up for a while, but he keeps muttering about some kind of monster, which is starting to annoy her. She tells him to hurry and get ready because Virion is already waiting for him outside. Arthur gets out of bed and starts changing. While he's doing so, Tessia asks if he's really planning to stay and become her grandpa's disciple. Arthur hasn't decided yet. It depends on whether Virion can really help him contact his family. As long as Arthur gets the chance to talk to his parents and let them know he's okay, he'll be satisfied. Once he's dressed, he and Tessia head downstairs. But as soon as they open the doors, they hear Alduin arguing with Virion, furious at the idea of Arthur living in the Elf Kingdom. Taking in a human as a disciple would go against centuries of elven tradition, but Virion doesn't care. He likes Arthur and plans to make him his disciple, no matter what anyone says. Tessia tries to speak up for Arthur, but Alduin ignores her because she clearly supports Arthur staying. Coincidentally, Virion doesn't care for Alduin's opinion either. So, he tells Arthur and Tessia to get in the carriage. They've got somewhere to be. On the long ride to meet Virion's mysterious friend, Tessia falls asleep. Arthur, now feeling more comfortable, calls Virion Grandpa and asks if it'll take much longer. Virion is amused by how quickly Arthur dropped the formalities, but if Arthur ends up living under his tutelage, he'll be like part of the family. Virion doesn't mind Arthur's casual tone. In fact, he's happy that Tessia finally has a real friend. As an only child and heir to the throne, alone. Most kids avoid her, and those who did befriend her only ended up betraying her trust. So she finds it hard to open up to people. But with Arthur, she's always smiling and having fun, and Virion is thankful for that. Arthur, who also has deep trust issues, feels like he can trust Virion, who just seems like a sincere and kind grandpa. Eventually, they arrive. Arthur wakes Tessia, and they all step out. Arthur is curious. This mysterious person must be very special if someone like Virion came all the way to see them. Virion stomps on the door and yells for Rainia to come out. When he puts his ear to the door, he gets smacked in the face as it swings open. After regaining his composure, Virion introduces Rainia as a special mage, and with her abilities, she might be able to help Arthur contact his family. She invites them all inside to begin. But once Arthur steps in, all he sees is an ordinary house with a bucket of water on the table, so he starts wondering how she's supposed to help him. Rainia explains that she is a special type of mage called a seer. As a seer, she can look into the past and future of people. She momentarily uses her powers on Arthur and quickly realizes he's an unusual case. There are parts of his past she can't see. But that's not surprising since she only sees fragments. That said, Arthur didn't come for a glimpse into his past or future. He wants to let his family know he's alive. Rainia slides a bucket of water in front of Arthur and tells him to think deeply about his parents to get the best result. She begins using her power, and within seconds, Arthur sees visions of his parents. Alice has just finished cooking stew, too much for two people, and though Reynolds loves it, neither of them can enjoy it without Arthur. For all they know, he died after falling off the cliff. Reynolds blamed himself so much that he nearly turned to alcohol, but had to care for his pregnant wife. They eventually moved to the city, where Reynolds found work and managed to afford a house within weeks. But no amount of success could ease the pain of losing Arthur. Suddenly, they hear Arthur's voice, but they can't see him. They fear it's his ghost. Arthur assures them he's alive and living in the elf kingdom of Elenoir. He doesn't fully understand the magic, but thanks to a friend, he's using a special spell to talk to them. He wants to come home, but can't right now. Something is wrong with his body, and he won't survive unless he fixes it. He promises to return once he's healed, though he's unsure how long that'll take. He asks them not to blame themselves, it was his choice, and he'd make the same one again if it meant keeping his family safe. Reynolds and Alice are overwhelmed with joy to hear Arthur is alive. Saying goodbye again brings Arthur to tears, but he's glad they got to speak. He resolves to never make them worry like that again, and to do that, he needs to become stronger. So, he asks Virion to make him his disciple. Now, they just need Alduin to approve Arthur living in the castle. Alduin is still opposed due to his deep hatred of humans, but Tessia reminds him that Arthur saved her. If he rejects Arthur, it would make him look like an ungrateful savage. Alduin argues that Arthur's presence might spark issues in the Elf Kingdom, but Virion already planned for this. He tells Alduin to publicly announce Arthur as his disciple. No one would dare challenge Virion's authority. With that, Arthur is officially granted permission to live in the royal palace. After the meeting, Alduin approaches Arthur to apologize for his earlier behavior. He still doesn't like humans much, but Arthur seems like a good kid. And since Arthur saved Tessia, it's Alduin's duty to repay him. He tells Arthur to think of himself as part of the family now. Arthur is surprised by how quickly Alduin and Miel changed their stance, but it makes sense considering how much Virion and Tessia stood up for him. Arthur thanks Alduin, calling it an honor to be welcomed into the royal castle. But Tessia interrupts, this isn't enough. If Arthur is really welcome, she wants him to be allowed to play outside with her. Since Alduin has already accepted him, he agrees. With that, Tessia excitedly drags Arthur into town to show him around. He's once again fascinated by elven culture. Tessia knows the area well and mentions a nearby shop that sells popular snacks. She warns him they need to hurry before everything sells out and pulls his arm to rush him along. Arthur happily follows her, but accidentally bumps into a kid on the way. It's an honest mistake, but the kid starts insulting Arthur and yells about filthy human germs. Arthur wonders how the kid dares to be so rude within punching range, but Tessia tells him to just ignore it. Causing trouble over something so minor isn't worth it. Normally, Arthur would have just walked away from someone like Ferrith, but when Ferrith starts insulting Tessia, saying she shouldn't hang out with trash like Arthur and should be spending time with him instead, Arthur decides to have a little fun. Ferreth, being a noble with an overinflated ego, clearly thinks too highly of himself. So Arthur pretends to be excited to meet him, only to deliberately mispronounce his name as Phoebich. Ferreth immediately gets mad, but Arthur fakes an apology, saying he'll make sure to show proper respect to Fifth next time. Then he turns to leave with Tessia. But Ferreth isn't done. He might be arrogant, but he's not dumb. He knows Arthur was mocking him, and he refuses to let it slide. He challenges Arthur to a duel, claiming it's a matter of family honor. Arthur can't believe how ridiculous this is. In his old world, a duel usually meant a fight to the death. Why would some kid casually challenge him like this? But judging from the amused looks of nearby adults, it's clear duels here are more like formal sparring matches than actual life or death battles. So Arthur shrugs and accepts. Tessia tries to stop the whole thing, warning Ferreth that Arthur is Virion's disciple. Challenging the student of the strongest man in the kingdom is, frankly, stupid. But Ferreth believes that there's no way a mere human could defeat him. He even goes so far as to say that refusing the duel would disgrace Virion's name. Arthur agrees, and the duel becomes official. When the fight begins, Ferreth charges in confidently with a wooden stick. But, like most people, he had a plan right up until Arthur punched him in the face. Ferreth drops instantly, unconscious before he even hits the ground. His friends rush over to help, but Tessia isn't surprised. She already knew it would end like this. With the duel over, she grabs Arthur's hand and pulls him away. They've got more places to explore. The two spend the rest of the day together, visiting shops, eating snacks, and enjoying the town. Eventually, they take a break on a quiet balcony, and Tessia asks when his training with Virion starts. Arthur tells her it begins first thing tomorrow, though something is clearly on his mind. He reflects on what Virion told him. The training is going to feel like hell, like being submerged in boiling tar, and he'll have to endure it for years without his family by his side. Virion wanted to be sure Arthur was truly ready, and Arthur was. Even now, despite knowing how painful it will be, he's excited to begin. He needs that strength to build the future he wants. Tessia nods and says she'll train hard too. She doesn't want to fall behind, but for now, she wants to enjoy the rest of their playdate. So, she grabs his hand again and suggests they go get some more food. A few years have passed, and both Arthur and Tessia have been training rigorously under Virion's instruction. Their bond has deepened during this time, though Tessia's naturally competitive spirit keeps things intense between them. After pushing herself hard in training, Tessia is exhausted and takes a break, giving Virion a chance to give Liam a lesson about magic. Virion explains that once someone stabilizes their mana core, they can begin using elemental magic, water, fire, wind, and earth. However, affinity to these elements varies by race. Elves excel at wind and have strong aptitude for water and earth, but struggle with fire. Dwarves are strong with fire and earth, but weaker in wind and water. Humans, uniquely, can use all four, although individual affinities still vary. Tessia then asks why Arthur hasn't started training with his mana core if it's so crucial. Virion answers that Arthur's current problem is due to the beast will inside his body. It grants great power, but it's also causing instability between his flesh and mana, resulting in chest pain. Until Arthur reassimilates his mana core, training with mana could be dangerous. Tessia jokes that she must be stronger than Arthur for now, since she can use mana in her attacks. Arthur fires back that it's not a fair comparison. Among elves, awakening mana before the age of 10 is rare, but Tessia awakened hers at 9, allowing her to train alongside Arthur ever since. Virion then tells Arthur it's time to awaken his beast wool, a risky but necessary step. If successful, it should stop the pain in his chest and mark him as an official beast tamer. Arthur agrees and the procedure begins. But it goes violently wrong. Arthur screams in pain and releases a huge surge of energy that blasts Virion and Tessia away. Though the awakening is technically successful, the strain causes Arthur to pass out immediately. They take him back to the castle to recover. When Arthur finally wakes up, Virion is at his bedside and asks how he feels. Arthur says he's okay. So Virion presses further. Was there anything unusual about the beast will? Arthur hesitates but finally tells him the truth. The will came from a dragon, specifically Sylvia. Virion is stunned. Dragon wills are incredibly rare and powerful, and it explains Arthur's extreme reaction. Virion warns him to tell no one, as even mentioning that he possesses a dragon will could bring dangerous attention. Virion also informs Arthur that, in 4 months, he's scheduled to return home. Arthur is confused. He thought he had 2 more years before the next Interkingdom meeting, but apparently a cultural exchange event has moved up the timeline. This means the portals to Zyra City will open much sooner than expected. Arthur asks if Tessia knows yet, concerned she'll be upset. Virion says the king and queen are informing her now. That night, Arthur lies in bed, thinking about his departure while holding the egg Sylvia gave him. Then, the egg begins to crack, a baby dragon hatches. Arthur is surprised, but it seems cute and harmless, so he picks it up until it suddenly bites his arm. Arthur yelps in pain and drops the dragon, but when he looks at his arm, instead of ordinary bite marks, he sees a crest forming. This crest is a magical link between Arthur and the dragon. It allows him to sense its thoughts, even if he can't fully understand them yet. Arthur decides to name the baby dragon Sylvie in honor of her mother, Sylvia. After settling back to sleep with Sylvie curled beside him, a few hours later, Tessia walks into his room, intending to talk about Arthur's upcoming departure in 4 months. But when she lifts the covers and sees Sylvie next to him, all thoughts of the serious conversation vanish. She's completely taken by the cuteness of the baby dragon. Startled awake, Arthur initially panics, but quickly realizes Tessia is just obsessed with Sylvie. He groans and goes back to sleep, leaving Tessia fussing over the dragon. Later that day, Arthur and Tessia head to the training grounds. Tessia tries her best to win Sylvie over, but Sylvie, still a bit traumatized from earlier cuddles, avoids her. When Virion sees Sylvie perched on Arthur's head, he's stunned. He never thought he'd see a dragon in real life. Arthur explains that Sylvie hatched as a result of the beast wool awakening, and while he worries her presence could cause issues, Virion assures him that dragons are considered mythical, and no one would believe Sylvie is one. Just claim she's an exotic beast, and people will accept it. Then, Virion announces it's time for training. Now that Arthur's beast will is awakened, he needs to train both his beast core and mana core, the most effective way being through real-life combat. To demonstrate what a beast will can do, Virion transforms into his beast form, a shadow panther, which grants him the ability to control wind and eliminate all sound from his movements. Arthur can't even track Virion's presence, and gives up almost immediately. Virion appears behind him, amused. While the ability is powerful, it's extremely mana-intensive, so he never meant to fight seriously. He was just showing Arthur the potential of beast wills. With that, Arthur's real training begins with a sword. Over the next few days, Arthur rapidly improves. The chest pain has vanished, and his body is toughened enough to keep up with Virion's shadow form. Outside of training, Arthur spends time playing with Tessia like a normal child. One day, while Arthur and Tessia are out on a date, Arthur bumps into a boy, Ferrith. Arthur doesn't recognize him, but Ferrith, insulted, demands a rematch. The duel is over in a flash. Ferrith is face down in the dirt. Still confused, Arthur is reminded by Tessia that Ferrith was the boy who challenged him to a duel years ago. Arthur remembers the fight fondly and offers Ferrith a hand, who accepts, giving up on further challenges. Arthur asks if Ferrith will be joining the upcoming cultural exchange, and Ferrith says yes, bragging that he was chosen for his talent, though in truth, all noble children were invited. Arthur asks if Tessia will be going to, but apparently not. The royal family doesn't want to risk their helpless princess being kidnapped again. Tessia punches Ferrith in the face so hard, he's knocked out cold. Arthur quickly grabs her and runs away before a crowd can gather. Once they're safe, he scolds her, reminding her she can't go around punching people, especially as a princess. Tessia, upset and defensive, calls him an old man and runs off crying. That night, still in tears, Tessia is surprised when Arthur climbs up to her window. He invites her for a walk in the forest, hoping to cheer her up. As they walk, Tessia asks if it's safe. Arthur reassures her if trouble appears, they're strong enough to escape. The view of the night sky is worth it. As they sit by a campfire, Tessia starts to doze off, trying hard to stay awake because she knows this may be the last quiet moment they share. She pretends she's cold, not scared of ghosts, she insists, and asks Arthur to tell her about the human kingdom. He admits he doesn't know much since he's never been there. She says she wishes he could stay forever, and Arthur says he would if he could, but that would mean never seeing his family again. Before they can talk more, she falls asleep beside him. Finally, the day of Arthur's departure arrives. Before he leaves, Virion gives him a gift, a magical compass that will guide him back to the Elf Kingdom if he ever wants to return. Arthur is grateful but notices Tessia is missing. Virion explains she couldn't bring herself to watch him leave. Just as the portal opens, Arthur hears Tessia call his name. She runs toward him, but falls halfway, and Arthur rushes to help her up. She rambles emotionally, warning him to take care of himself or she'll never forgive him. Understanding how much she truly cares, Arthur pulls her into one last hug, quietly telling her that he's going to miss her a lot.